Iraq is welcoming back foreign oil firms after decades of tight control under Saddam Hussein. A move already marred in deep political controversy. Just what are its benefits and what are the risks? This is Inside Story. Hello, I am Hashim Al-Bara. For the first time in 4 decades, Iraqi oil goes international. At least 30 companies will take part in the first bidding round for service contracts of 8 oil and gas fields in Iraq. On Tuesday, the Iraqi Federal Ministry of Oil announces the results of its auction. Hussein al-Shahristani, the oil minister, is convinced the deals are in Iraq's best interests. He said the country would earn $1.7 trillion over the next 2 decades, and in his words, this is a huge amount that would finance infrastructure projects across Iraq: schools, roads, airports, housing and hospitals. And while insisting the Iraqi government would retain control over its oil reserves, Shahristani said, "Our principal objective is to increase our oil production from 2.4 million barrels per day to more than 4 million barrels in the next 5 years." The contracts have not been signed yet, but they are already plagued with problems. The foreign oil companies want a long-term contract and a share of the oil they produce. Iraqis in the oil industry prefer the foreign companies are brought in on a short-term basis only and paid a fixed fee until Iraqi firms are capable of managing and developing the oil fields themselves. In addition, the bidding has irked Iraq's Kurds. 2 oil fields being bid are in the semi-autonomous region of northern Iraq, which is controlled by the Kurdistan Regional Government, also known as KRG. On Friday, the Prime Minister of KRG, Nishirvan Barzani, released a statement against the bidding. He said, "This auction is a violation of Iraq's federal constitution. The proposed oil ministry contracts are not in the best interest of the Iraqi people. Any decision related to contracting for Kirkuk and Bay Hassan fields requires the direct involvement of the KRG as a party to the dispute. Regrettably, the KRG has not been involved." Well, joining us today are our guest in Baghdad, Iraqi government spokesman Ali Dabagh, in London, Kurdish Natural Resources Minister Ashti Hawrami, and also in London, Peter Camp, Editorial Director for Energy Intelligence. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me start by asking Mr. Ali Dabagh in Baghdad, who, from a legal and constitutional perspective, owns the rights of the oil fields in Iraq to put them up for an auction?
The federal government, represented by the Ministry of Oil, is the one who is owning this right. Well, the Constitution had clearly said that it will be in conjunction with the federal, with the regional government or the governorate, which is a producing oil governorate. This needs a law. Oil law should be ready. Now, we don't have, in the absence of oil law, the Iraqi government, the Ministry of Oil had referred to the old laws, which is a prevailing law here in Iraq, and did this bidding round, which is, they feel that this is the legal way and legal step in order to upgrade the oil production from the oil fields in Iraq.
Again, there's a lot of squabble over semantics. You were saying there were no laws, and therefore Shahristani had to refer to the 1972 law, which many think is open to different interpretations. And therefore, let me go to Mr. Ashti Hawrami, London. What are your objections as Kurds to this tender, Mr. Hawrami?
Well, there are 2 major problems with these contracts. One is the Constitution, which is under the Constitution supposed to be a share power, Article 112, and my colleague Ali Dabagh just said that. And the Constitution is the ultimate law of the land. So that is the law. That is what the Constitution, what the Iraqi people voted for. So why Dr. Shahristani hasn't consulted the producing governors or the regions? The Constitution doesn't give him any sole right to do that. We have to go by the Constitution, not by the laws of Saddam. And laws of Saddam basically have 2 problems with them. One, under Article 13 of the Constitution, they are nullified. That's number one. Number two, they do not actually encourage any type of contracting of this type, because under the Saddam's laws, the contracts used to go to Parliament, and the Parliament has to approve them, not Ministry of Oil. So basically, from the constitutional point of view, they are flawed. They are actually inconsistent with the Constitution, and they cannot be legally binding on anyone.
Okay.
But our main problem, and this is a general problem for all Iraqi people, by the way, we have specific problem with two of the fields. We're saying we should be at the negotiation table so that we can contribute to the discussion, to the negotiation on these contracts.
You're referring to the Hassan, to the Kirkuk oil fields.
That's correct. That way, and for that matter, Basra, for example, the governing council of Basra should be involved in Misan the same way. And our fight is not Kurd Arab. This is about what is the right thing about these fields for Iraq.
And
you know, it should be a joint decision.
Okay, and it's more about
so
the future.
That is basically on the legality. But the fundamental problem.
We'll definitely come back and talk about the legalities of these issues, and particularly the row over the territorial claims. But let me go now to Peter Kamp. Shahristani has been saying that this is something that has the potential to bring in a lot of cash for the Iraqi government, $1.7 trillion. But what we are hearing from Ali Dabagh and Mr. Hawrami is that this is something that could degenerate into more clashes in the future between particularly the Kurds and the Shia-dominated government.
That's possible. My understanding is that Mr. Shahristani came up with those figures just last week when he was quizzed on 2 occasions by the Parliament to explain, in his view, what the deals would be worth to the country, and to point up, by contrast with the trillions that he said would be coming to the Iraqi treasury, the few billions that the oil companies as contractors would take away in service fees if they achieve the very demanding increases in production which the contracts will oblige them to deliver.
Right. Mr. Ali Dabagh, there are different obstacles that have to be overcome before talking about finalization of these contracts. One of them, as has been mentioned by Ashti Hawrami and the Prime Minister of the KRG, when he said, we have not been consulted and therefore we would not abide by any new contracts which will be considered as breaking the laws of gas and oil in Kurdistan. How are you going to deal with that?
Well, as I said, that the federal government got the sole responsibility for initiating the negotiation. The sharing power, as our friend Mr. Hawrami said, that is the operation of the fields that will be jointly with the Ministry of Oil, which the Constitution declared. We feel now this bidding round is transparent enough, which shows that there is nothing hidden. While if we go back to the contract which has been signed by the KRG, the federal government knows anything about it. Didn't know, nobody had informed, nobody had showed that contract. This is one of the things which is create the dispute between the Ministry of Oil and the KRG.
But although you didn't know anything about it, you knew that cash will be pumped into your coffers. That's why you had no concerns in principle.
That is a good step. That is very good step. We had said this is a very positive step, this is a wise step, and we had approved and we welcome that step, which makes that dispute to an end for it.
Okay.
We are appreciating that step, yes.
Ashti, this is, to me, the official stance of the government. Let Baghdad run the show. You will get cash. If you challenge the authority and the sovereignty of the government, then you will be in deep problems.
I'm sorry, we go by the Constitution. The Constitution giving us equal right, because it says together. And if we are not party to that decision together, then we do not respect any contract signed by the federal government alone. Negotiation is part of that. It's not federal government goes signs a contract and then invite us, say, come work with us together here. So we have to be party to the negotiation. But let me focus on more important thing actually, the economics of these contracts. The economics of these contracts is what we are strongly objecting to as well, maybe even more than the first point. We done the analysis of the contracts. The contracts basically, by contrast with what we do in KRG, they give too much to the oil companies. The reason, because the structure of the contracts is bad, therefore the companies have no choice but demand more compensation.
But
let me...
Can I just add this one, please? Ali Shahristani was quoted as saying that out of the $1.7 trillion, the foreign firms will just get 30 billion. Proportionally speaking, this is not a lot.
That is not correct. May I comment on that?
Please.
The contracts are structured around baseline production, which is what currently these fields are able to produce by Iraqi National Oil Company, and on incremental recovery, incremental production, that the investment of these oil companies adds the increment to the baseline. Now, when you remove the baseline, because that is oil coming out of the ground based on the past investment, then the actual compensation of the oil companies in terms of profit is about $5.70 per incremental barrel of oil. Net present value of that at NPV 10 is about $2.20 per every barrel increased through the effort of these companies.
All right, let me
by contrast to that, by contrast to that, my friend, what we do in Kurdistan on exploration, small acreage, we actually only giving the oil companies $1.10 NPV 10 recovery.
All right.
So you're giving twice as much per barrel of incremental for the giant fields of Iraq compared to what we do in exploration.
Okay.
Therefore, they are not to the interest of Iraq at all.
I'm sorry I have to interrupt you here, but you're saying that you're doing far better than the Iraqi government. Let me go to Peter Camp. Do you think that the foreign firms will be further tempted to invest in Iraq, given what we have been hearing from Ali Dabagh and Mr. Hawrami about the constitutional problems, problem of legacy, problems of legitimacy, and the future of Iraq itself?
Well, Hashim, you've put your finger on a highly sensitive issue for everybody looking at the opportunities in Iraq, and that is the lack of clarity from well, very clear from the government, but disputed by the Kurdistan regional government. Also, there's a lot of unhappiness amongst the regional operating companies, particularly the South Oil Company, about the incoming foreign partners, certainly among elements within those companies. So the uncertainty is a great concern to the companies, but they feel it's an opportunity that is being presented to them. They would be very foolish to turn their back on it. So they are going with the flow. Now, where events will flow remains to be seen. There are so many questions to be answered about the legality, about the practicality, and about the ultimate economic rewards.
Right. Iraq has the world's third largest oil reserves, mostly untapped and unexplored. Major oil companies are no doubt tempted with the business opportunity it presents, but clearly there are risks involved. As discussed earlier on, the big question remains, who exactly controls the Iraqi oil in the north of the country, the federal government or the Kurdish regional government? And what happens when Iraq goes to the polls early next year? Will the next government respect the contracts made by its predecessor? Also, some of the companies bidding right now were kicked out of the country when Iraqi oil industry was nationalized in the 1970s, after holding a tight grip on the country's oil since the 1920s. Could history repeat itself? Plus, there are security concerns with the Kurds and Sunnis opposing the presence of foreign companies in the country and the American troops pulling out of Iraq. So, do the rewards outweigh the risks? Is it a gamble rather than an investment? We're still joined by our guest in Baghdad, Ali Dabagh, in London, Ashti Hawrami, and also Peter Camp. Mr. Ali Dabagh, the Iraqi parliament has threatened to block the deal. You have another big concern in the future with the next January elections. Aren't you concerned that the next elections might bring a new government who might renegade on the old deals and say that's not going to be on the table again?
They can't. This is an elected government, and it is legitimate, all the decision which has been taken. And I don't think such contract needs an approval from the parliament. It is the sole responsibility of the elected government, and it is a binding government. It's going to bind this government as well as binding the country. And the coming and the future government definitely it will be committed to this contract and agreement if it has been signed. Now we have tomorrow the bidding ground, and we are going to see and find out at the end. The cabinet will decide how visible is that figures which we are getting, whether it is for the benefit of the Iraq, is it for the benefit of the country, and accordingly they will take the decision whether to sign it or not.
But
most probably that the government. Yes,
so you're still trying to
please.
present a very robust stance of the government when we know that members of the government themselves are opposed to this deal. Members of the Iraqi oil ministry are opposed to the deal. The head of the oil and gas committee in the parliament has been saying that this is going to be an economic occupation of Iraq.
Well, you know, we are living in a democracy, and then we have a freedom of expression. They could say that, and at the end there is a government elected, which that if it is approved that the contract, then the parliament should vote for such government. If it is taking a decision which is opposing the will and the interest of the member of the parliament, but we don't think so. We don't think that there is an opposition, a huge and a great opposition for this bidding ground. At the end, we are looking for the benefit and interest of the country. All of, even the parliament member and the head of the oil committee there, they are looking for one objective, the same as the government.
Which doesn't seem to be the feeling shared by the Kurds in the north. Mr. Ashti Hawrami, what will happen if tomorrow the oil ministry announce the auctions? What will be your reaction?
Well, I think we're making too much out of this anyway. First of all, this is just opening some bids and people say certain things and you hear some figures. This is not a contract or contract signing, as Ali Dabak said. I doubt sincerely, actually, I hope that this never actually see the daylight, because none of these bids will become contracts, certainly not under this government. So I think all of this will be discussion of the next few months till we get to elections and then into the next parliament. So really all we do when we ignite the situation, totally unnecessary, while we should be sitting down quietly, find out how to solve our constitutional problems and moving with the law to encourage the real investment into Iraq. This is really designed to cover the bad mistakes of the past by Dr. Shahristani. He has spent $8 to $10 billion of investment of Iraqi state money, and production is declining year after year under his leadership. And now what he's doing, trying to have a quick fix, but you know, magically bring these major oil companies into the studio and open up bids and everything hunky-dory. This is not going to happen. This is not the way to plan oil policy.
Let me go to Mr. Peter Camp. The Iraqis have been saying basically that on top of the $8 billion invested, they need $50 billion invested. That's why they need the presence of foreign firms to create more jobs, to generate more cash, and to build and help rebuild Iraq. It seems very simple and very good. Is it going to be very easy to sell to the international community?
Well, as you say, it seems very simple. Certainly there has been a positive response from oil companies. They have their doubts and the questions about whether it'll actually work out in practice. Minister Hawrami put his finger on the issue there. What happens tomorrow and Wednesday at the Al Rashid Hotel when these bids are opened does not mean that we have contracts and oil companies move in tomorrow. There will be months, possibly years, of negotiation and discussion until we have final contracts and things start to move on the ground. But certainly the model that's being proposed of bringing in foreign companies to share the risks, to inject capital and to bring technology is well proven, is used elsewhere. We will see if it has an application in Iraq. Against what we can see is a lot of hostility within the country to this opening.
Ali Dabak, aren't you concerned that this can irk the Sunnis in the future? Because, as you know, some of them have been lashing out at the government. Some of them question the legitimacy of the government, saying that we don't have a say in this. The Kurds enjoy the benefits of the oil they have. The Shia in the south, we have nothing practically.
Well, this is again a political situation here in Iraq, which reflect. I do agree that we do have a problem. There is inconsistency here in many issues, but at the end, we have to find a way in order to end such a 6 years which we couldn't utilize, we couldn't develop our oil sector. I appreciate what all our friends they had said, but at the end, now the decision is going to be taken. I don't find that there is the negotiation will take years, no. I think that we took enough. The Ministry of Oil, even here in the government, the cabinet, somebody's criticizing the Ministry of Oil that they had delayed in declaring this bidding ground, and we had spent 6 years till now, and still our production is 2-point-something million, which we should exceed the 4 million for the first 5 years. Again, everything is possible, but the decision has been taken that we have to end the bidding ground tomorrow, and the thing will be presented to the cabinet to take the decision as soon as possible as they can.
So you're saying this is a byproduct of democracy, decisions have been made, but Ashti Hawarami is not impressed with what you have been saying, particularly when you make it final, decisions will be taken. Mr. Ashti?
Well, let's come back to are these good contracts? I think the fundamental problem, talk to any of the bidders actually, they will tell you privately and some publicly, the interests of the company and the state is not in alignment. When you have that clash, the ultimate loser is the state.
Well, you have elaborated on the technicalities of the contract.
Because you are maximizing the reserves.
I'm sorry to interrupt you here. You've talked more in detail about the technicalities of the contract, but your concern to me is more political than technical. Is that correct?
I think it's on both counts. We are shared partners in this country, and we have a constitutional right. We, people in Kurdistan, people in Basra, people in Misan, should be consulted on each of the contracts, relevant contracts to them. And jointly with the Ministry of Oil, we could have arrived at a decision which would be win-win for the country. But if I was at the negotiation table, I certainly wouldn't still accept this contract, because the terms are not very good for Iraq. We're giving too much away for too little the companies doing. I mean, I am in London right now. I actually know at least 3 of the companies involved that are actively trying to recruit service companies, to come and do their work for them.
All right.
Sending them in, because they have no intention sending their own people in. They cannot do it. Therefore, this is a paperwork. This is not a real contract.
Okay, let me involve Mr. Peter Camp. Mr. Peter, despite the contractual demands, for example, the foreign firms will have to partner with local companies. They will have to share management of fields, despite the fact that they will be financing the development. They will have to agree for getting fixed fee per barrel instead of the lucrative share of profits. But apparently it seems that the mere concern of these firms is cash, and they will get a lot of cash apparently from Iraq.
Well, I don't know who's telling you that. There are concerns about the structure of the field operating divisions on the part of the foreign partners, because they must form a joint venture with the South Oil Company in the south, Misan Oil Company in the Misan region, and the North Oil Company in the northern region. And in the contract documents, at an earlier stage, it was not very clear to the companies who would control these field operating divisions, how many local staff they would hire, who would pay for what. So there are control issues. If they're going to be putting in millions to increase production, they want to be sure of being able to control operations. And that was an area of concern in the negotiations, but who knows? We'll see what comes when they get down to hammering out the details of these operating companies.
We'll definitely have to see what happens tomorrow when the tender is announced and the ramifications of that on the future of Iraq. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.